The scratching of the pen sounded like a scream in the silent, opulent dining room. The Rutherfords watched with sadistic glee, their crystal wine glasses raised in a silent toast. They thought they had finally won. They thought they were discarding a gold-digging waitress who didn't fit into their prestigious world. As Eleanor signed the divorce papers on Christmas Eve, tears falling onto the crisp document, her husband, Mark, wouldn't even look her in the eye. But as the ink dried, they had no idea of the mistake they had just made. They didn't know that the poor girl they were throwing out into the snow was actually the sole heiress to the Sterling Empire, and by the time they found out, it would cost them everything. The chandelier above the dining table at the Rutherford estate cost more than the house Elena grew up in, or at least the house she told Mark she grew up in. Its crystals cast fractured rainbows across the pristine white tablecloth, but there was no warmth in the light. Elena adjusted the hem of her navy blue dress. It was modest, elegant, and purchased off the rack at a department store. Beside the glittering designer gowns worn by her mother-in-law Beatrice and her sister-in-law Chloe, it looked like a rag. "Pass the salt, dear," Beatrice said, her voice dripping with that distinct mixture of politeness and venom she had perfected over 60 years. "If you can reach it. I know you're used to smaller tables. Cramped diner booths, wasn't it?" Chloe snickered behind her hand, sipping her vintage Merlot. "Mum, don't be rude. Elena was a waitress, not a patron. She's used to standing next to the tables." Elena felt the familiar burn of humiliation rise in her cheeks. She looked at Mark, sitting at the head of the table, her husband of 2 years, the man who had swept her off her feet in a coffee shop in Seattle, promising her that his family's money didn't define him. Mark was staring at his plate, cutting his roast goose with surgical precision. He didn't look up. He didn't defend her. "I'm happy to be here," Elena said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "It's Christmas. I just wanted us to have a nice dinner." "A nice dinner requires nice company," Beatrice muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. She turned her gaze to her son. "Mark, darling, have you told her yet? Or are we going to pretend to enjoy this charade until dessert?" Elena's heart skipped a beat. She dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against the china, drawing a wince from Mark. "Told me what?" Elena asked, looking between them. The atmosphere in the room shifted. It went from passive-aggressive coldness to a sharp, predatory silence. Mark finally looked up. His eyes, usually a warm hazel, looked dull and exhausted. He looked like a man who had been browbeaten into submission, but there was a hardness there too, a resolve that terrified her. "Elena," Mark started, clearing his throat. You know things haven't been working. We've had a few arguments," Elena pleaded, reaching for his hand across the table. He pulled his hand away before she could touch him. "Every couple argues, Mark. It's just the stress of the holidays." "It's not stress, Elena," Chloe interjected, slamming her glass down. "It's you. You don't fit in. You never have. Look at you. You're wearing polyester to a Rutherford Christmas dinner. You don't know which fork to use. You embarrass him." "Chloe, stop," Mark said. But there was no fire in his rebuke. He reached under his chair and pulled out a large manila envelope. It wasn't wrapped in red paper or a gold bow. It was stark, legal, and terrifying. "My mother and I have been talking," Mark said, his voice devoid of emotion, reciting a script he had clearly been fed, "about the future of the Rutherford Group, about my image. We're merging with the Kensington firm next month. I need a partner who understands this world, who brings something to the table besides." He gestured vaguely at her. "Bills." Elena felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "Bills? Mark, I pay for my own things. I work at the library. Pocket change, Beatrice scoffed. You are a liability, Elena. A social anchor dragging my son to the bottom of the ocean. Mark slid the envelope across the mahogany table. It stopped right in front of her plate, resting against the crystal gravy boat. I want a divorce, Elena, Mark said. It's over. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the crackling of the fire in the massive hearth behind them. Elena stared at the envelope. On Christmas Eve, she whispered. You're doing this on Christmas Eve. Best time for a fresh start, Beatrice said, slicing a piece of meat. Consider it a gift. We're being generous. There's a check in there for $10,000. Enough to get you back to whatever trailer park you crawled out of. Elena looked at Mark, searching for the man who had once kissed her in the rain, who had sworn he loved her simplicity. Mark, she said, her voice cracking. Is this really what you want? For $10,000, you're throwing away 2 years of marriage. Mark looked at his mother, then at his sister. They were watching him like hawks. He straightened his tie. Take the money, Elena. Sign the papers. Don't make a scene. It's the best you're going to get. Elena's hands were shaking so badly she could barely open the clasp of the envelope. Inside were 3 copies of a divorce settlement. It was standard, cold, and brutal. Irreconcilable differences, waiver of spousal support, lump sum payment, $10,000. She felt a vibration in the pocket of her dress. It was her phone. She knew who it was. It was the only person who called her at this hour on Christmas Eve. Daddy. She ignored it. She couldn't let them hear his voice. Not now. Well, Beatrice snapped. The ink isn't going to dry itself. We have guests arriving for the cocktail hour at 8. I want you gone by then. Elena looked around the room. This mansion, with its 12 bedrooms and 6 baths, had never been a home. It had been a museum where she was the unwanted exhibit. She thought about the secret she had kept for 2 years. When she met Mark, she wanted to be loved for her, not for the sterling name. She wanted to know that a man would choose Elena, the girl who liked old books and rainy days, not Elena Sterling, the daughter of Arthur Sterling, the man who owned half the real estate in New York and London. She had tested Mark. She had played the role of the poor orphan. And for a while he passed. But the poison of the Rutherford elitism had finally seeped into his veins. He had failed the test. A strange calm washed over her. The tears were still flowing, hot and stinging, but her heart was hardening, turning into something like the diamond Mark had refused to buy her. You think I'm after your money? Elena said quietly. We know you are, Chloe laughed. Why else would you stay where you aren't wanted? And you? Elena looked at Mark. You think I'm an anchor? You think I have nothing to offer? Let's be realistic, Elena. Mark sighed, pulling a fountain pen from his jacket pocket. A Mont Blanc she had saved up for 6 months to buy him for his birthday last year. He slid it toward her. You're a nice girl. But you're not one of us. No, Elena said, picking up the pen. The weight of it felt familiar. I'm certainly not one of you. She flipped to the last page. Signature of petitioner, Mark Rutherford. Signature of respondent. She didn't hesitate. She didn't read the clauses. She didn't argue for more money. She simply signed her name, Elena Rutherford. Then she did something unexpected. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet box. She placed it on the table next to the signed papers. I got you a Christmas gift, Mark, she said, her voice steady now. I was going to give it to you later tonight. But since I'm leaving... Chloe rolled her eyes. Oh God, what is it? A knitted coaster? A coupon book for back rubs? Mark stared at the velvet box. He didn't touch it. Elena stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. She looked at Beatrice, then Chloe, and finally rested her gaze on Mark. "You can keep the $10,000, she said. "I don't need it." "Don't be a martyr," Beatrice spat. "You have nothing." "I have my dignity," Elena said. "And as of this moment, I have my freedom." She turned and walked toward the massive oak doors of the dining hall. "Wait!" Mark called out, a flicker of guilt crossing his face. "Where are you going to go? It's snowing. It's 10 below zero." "Don't worry about me, Mark," Elena said without looking back. "I'm going home." "Home?" Chloe laughed shrilly. "To what?" "A cardboard box." Elena opened the heavy front door. A gust of freezing wind blew into the hallway, swirling snow onto the marble foyer. She stepped out into the dark, cold night. As the heavy door slammed shut behind her, muting the sound of the Rutherfords' laughter, Eleanor reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. She hit the call button. "Daddy," she said, her voice breaking as the cold air hit her lungs. A deep, commanding voice answered instantly on the other end. A voice that made CEOs tremble and stock markets shift. "Elena, why are you whispering? Are you all right? I've been waiting for you to call. The jet is fueled at the private airstrip, but you said you were staying with him." Elena looked back at the Rutherford mansion, glowing with golden light, looming like a beast in the night. "No, Daddy," she said, wiping the tears from her cheeks. "I'm not staying. I'm done. Come get me." "Did he hurt you?" The voice on the phone dropped an octave, turning dangerous. Arthur Sterling was protective of only one thing in this world: his daughter. "He broke my heart," Elena whispered, "but that's not the worst part." "What is?" "He thinks I'm a nobody." There was a pause on the line. Then Arthur Sterling let out a low, dark chuckle. "Well then, my darling, it seems we have some business to attend to. I'll be there in 10 minutes. And Eleanor?" "Yes?" "Dry your eyes. Sterlings don't cry over spilled milk. We buy the dairy farm and shut it down." As Eleanor stood in the snow at the end of the long driveway, headlights cut through the darkness. But it wasn't a taxi. It wasn't an Uber. It was a convoy of 3 black Cadillac Escalades, followed by a sleek, silver Rolls-Royce Phantom. The lead car bore the crest of Sterling Global. Inside the house, Mark finally reached out and opened the velvet box Eleanor had left behind. Beatrice leaned in. "Well, what trash did she leave you?" Mark stared into the box. All the blood drained from his face. It wasn't a watch. It wasn't a ring. Inside the box was a positive pregnancy test, and underneath it, a small note written in Eleanor's elegant handwriting. "You said I brought nothing to the table. I was bringing you a son. Merry Christmas, Mark?" Mark dropped the box. The plastic test clattered onto his fine china plate. "What is it?" Beatrice demanded. "She's pregnant," Mark whispered, horror dawning on him. "I just divorced my pregnant wife in the middle of a blizzard." Outside, the Rolls-Royce door opened, and a man in a tuxedo stepped out into the snow, holding a massive umbrella. He bowed low to Eleanor. "Miss Sterling," the driver said, "your father is waiting." The game had just begun. The wind howled, whipping Elena's hair across her face, stinging her tear-stained cheeks. But the moment the door of the silver Rolls-Royce opened, the cold vanished. A warmth radiated from the vehicle, smelling of expensive leather and aged mahogany. Arthur Sterling stepped out. At 65, he was an imposing figure. He wore a cashmere coat that cost more than the Rutherfords' annual country club membership. His hair was silver, his eyes a piercing steel blue, the same eyes Elena had. He didn't look like a loving father in that moment. He looked like a warlord surveying a battlefield. He didn't care about the snow soaking his Italian loafers. He strode toward Elena and wrapped her in a crushing embrace. "I've got you," he rumbled against her hair. "I've got you, Ellie." Elena collapsed against him, the strength finally leaving her legs. "I tried, Daddy. I really tried." "I know," Arthur said, his voice tightening. "You have a heart too big for this world, and certainly too big for these insects." He looked up at the Rutherford mansion. Through the sheer curtains of the dining room window, he could see silhouettes moving. "Did they hurt you?" "They humiliated me," Elena sobbed. "They made me sign papers. They gave me $10,000 to leave." Arthur scoffed, a sound like a gunshot. "10,000? I tip my caddy more than that." The driver, a burly man named Silas, who had been Arthur's head of security for 20 years, held the umbrella over them. "Sir, we should get her inside. It's freezing." Arthur nodded and guided Eleanor into the back of the Rolls-Royce. The interior was a sanctuary. The seats were heated, soft jazz played from hidden speakers, and a crystal decanter of water sat on a console. As Silas put the car in gear, the front door of the Rutherford house flew open. Mark stumbled out onto the porch, breathless. He was holding the velvet box in one hand and the pregnancy test in the other. He squinted into the darkness, his eyes adjusting to the glare of the tail lights. He saw the convoy, 3 black Escalades flanking a silver Rolls-Royce Phantom. Mark froze. He blinked, thinking the wine was playing tricks on him. Why would a convoy of diplomatic-level security vehicles be picking up his waitress ex-wife? "Elena!" he shouted, but the wind tore the name from his lips. Inside the Rolls, Elena saw him through the tinted rear window. He looked small, pathetic. "Do you want me to stop?" Arthur asked, his hand hovering over the intercom button. "I can have Silas go back there and explain the situation to him. Physically, if you prefer." Elena watched Mark shivering on the porch. A part of her, the part that had loved him, wanted to roll down the window and scream at him. But the part of her that was a sterling, the part that had been dormant for 2 years, woke up. "No," Elena said, turning her head away. "Drive." The convoy glided down the long driveway, leaving Mark Rutherford standing alone in the snow, clutching a plastic stick that proved he was going to be a father, watching a ghost disappear into the night. Inside the car, the atmosphere was heavy. Arthur poured a glass of water for Elena. "There is something else," Elena said, her hand resting instinctively on her stomach. "You need to know." Arthur looked at her hand. His eyes widened. The billionaire who had negotiated treaties and hostile takeovers looked suddenly terrified. "Ellie, are you—" "You're going to be a grandfather," she whispered. Arthur Sterling sat back, the air leaving his lungs in a rush. A slow, genuine smile broke through his stony expression. Tears welled in his eyes, a sight the business world had never seen. "A baby," he murmured. "A Sterling heir." Then his expression darkened, shifting instantly from grandfather to protector. "Does he know?" "I left the test for him," Elena said. "It was my parting gift." Arthur nodded slowly. "Good. Let him suffer with the knowledge. But he will never see this child. He signed away his rights when he signed those papers. He threw you out. He abandoned his family." Arthur pulled out his phone. It was a sleek, encrypted device. He dialed a number. "Edwards, it's Arthur. Wake up the legal team." "Yes, all of them. I want the finest divorce attorneys in New York and London on a conference call in 1 hour. My daughter is coming home. And Edwards, start a file on the Rutherford Group. I want to know their assets, their debts, their shareholders, and their blood type. I want to know what they eat for breakfast. He hung up and looked at Elena. Rest now, darling. By tomorrow morning, the world will be different. You entered that house as a waitress. You're leaving it as the queen on the board. Mark Rutherford woke up with a pounding headache. For a moment, he thought it was just a hangover from the vintage Merlot. Then, he rolled over and saw the empty side of the bed. The sheets were cold. Memory crashed over him. The dinner, the papers, the box, the baby. He sat up, panic gripping his chest. He scrambled for his phone on the nightstand. He had tried calling Eleanor 10 times last night. Straight to voicemail. He tried again. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Mark stared at the screen, disconnected. In less than 12 hours, she had vanished. He threw on a robe and went downstairs. The house was quiet, except for the clinking of china in the breakfast nook. Beatrice and Chloe were already there, looking fresh and unbothered. Beatrice was reading the Wall Street Journal. Chloe was scrolling through Instagram. "Sit down, Mark," Beatrice said, without looking up. "Eat something. You look terrible." "Her phone is disconnected," Mark said, pacing the room. "Mum, she's pregnant. We kicked a pregnant woman out into a blizzard." "She claims she's pregnant," Beatrice corrected, sipping her tea. "For all we know, it's a trick, a desperate attempt to claw her way back into the will." "I saw the test, Mum. It was positive." "Tests can be faked," Chloe chimed in, biting into a croissant. "You can buy positive ones online for $20. It's a classic gold digger move." Mark ran a hand through his hair. "But what if it's real? That's my child." Beatrice finally put down the paper. She looked at her son with a mixture of pity and annoyance. "Mark, listen to me. Even if there is a child, do you really want Elena raising it? She has no money, no education, no connections. If the child exists, we will sue for full custody. We have the Rutherford name. We have the best lawyers. She has $10,000 and a sob story. No judge will give her the baby." Mark stopped pacing. "Take the baby?" "Of course," Beatrice said smoothly. "We'll raise the child properly. Boarding schools, etiquette lessons, the Ivy League. We'll save the child from a life of mediocrity. But first, we need to focus. Today is the preliminary meeting for the Kensington merger." "The merger," Mark muttered. "Right. This deal will triple our net worth, Mark," Beatrice said, her eyes gleaming. "The Kensington Group is acting on behalf of a silent investor, Titan Holdings. They are looking to acquire a mid-sized firm with family values and legacy. That is us. If we close this deal, we enter the billionaire bracket. Do not let a weepy waitress ruin this for us." Mark took a deep breath. His mother was right. Money fixed everything. If Eleanor really had the baby, he could just buy his way out of the guilt. He could pay her off, take the kid, and move on. "Okay," Mark said, straightening his posture. "Okay, let's get ready. What time is the meeting?" 10:15 a.m. at the Kensington headquarters in Manhattan. Meanwhile, 40 miles away, in the penthouse suite of the Sterling Tower overlooking Central Park, Elena woke up in a bed made of Egyptian cotton. She wasn't in the guest room. She was in her old suite, the one her father had kept untouched for 2 years. The walls were painted a soft lavender. Her old riding trophies lined the shelves. She sat up. There was no dread in her stomach today. Only a cold, hard clarity. The door opened, and a team of 3 women bustled in. They weren't maids, they were stylists. "Good morning, Miss Sterling," the lead stylist, a sharp French woman named Celine, said. "Your father requested we prepare you for a business meeting. He said, and I quote, 'Dress her to kill.'" Elena slid out of bed. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. Below her, the city of New York looked like a circuit board, buzzing with energy. "Did he say which meeting?" Elena asked. "He said you are attending the acquisition preliminary," Celine said, wheeling in a rack of clothes. "He said you are the new acting CEO of Titan Holdings." Elena froze. Titan Holdings. She knew her father's shell companies. Titan was the entity buying the Rutherford Group. A slow smile spread across her face. It wasn't a nice smile. "I see," Elena said. She turned to the rack of clothes. Gone were the polyester dresses from the department store. Gone were the sensible flats. Hanging there were power suits from Chanel, Armani, and McQueen. "No," Elena said, pushing aside a navy suit. "Not blue. Mark likes blue. He thinks it makes me look sweet." She reached into the back and pulled out a suit in a deep, blood-red crimson. It was sharp, tailored, and aggressive. "This one," she said. "Excellent choice," Celine said. "And for jewelry?" Elena walked to her vanity. She opened a safe hidden behind the mirror. Inside sat the sterling diamonds, heirlooms that had been in the family for generations. She bypassed the modest pearls. She reached for a necklace her mother had left her. A platinum chain holding a single, massive black diamond, surrounded by rubies. It looked like a drop of dark blood. "This one," Elena said. An hour later, Eleanor looked in the mirror. The girl who had cried over a roast goose was gone. In her place stood Eleanor Sterling. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. Her makeup was flawless, emphasizing her sharp cheekbones and icy eyes. The red suit screamed power. The diamond screamed wealth. She walked out to the living room where Arthur was waiting. He was drinking espresso and reading a dossier. He looked up, and pride swelled in his chest. "You look like your mother," he said softly. God rest her soul. She would have enjoyed this. "Are the papers ready?" Elena asked, pulling on the black leather gloves. "Everything is set," Arthur said, standing up. "The Rutherfords think they are meeting with a representative named Mr. Smith. They have no idea Titan Holdings is a sterling subsidiary." "And the divorce?" "My lawyers filed it at 9 a.m. this morning," Arthur said. "But we filed in a different jurisdiction. We filed based on fraud and emotional distress. We froze their joint accounts pending investigation." "They don't know that yet," Elena noted. "No, they'll find out when their cards get declined at lunch," Arthur smirked. "But first the meeting." Arthur walked over to her and placed his hands on her shoulders. "Elena, are you sure you want to do this? You don't have to be in the room. I can crush them for you." Elena adjusted her gloves. She thought of Beatrice's sneer. She thought of Chloe's laughter. She thought of Mark signing the papers without looking at her. "No, Daddy," she said coldly. "I want to see their faces. I want them to know exactly who they threw away." "Very well," Arthur offered his arm. "Shall we go buy a company?" The conference room at Kensington Corp was all glass and steel. Mark, Beatrice, and Chloe sat on one side of the long table. They were nervous. This was the big leagues. "Stop fidgeting, Mark," Beatrice hissed. "You're wrinkling your suit." "Where are they?" Mark checked his watch. "It's 10:05. "Power play," Chloe whispered. "They make us wait to show they're in charge." "We are the Rutherfords," Beatrice said, though her voice wavered slightly. "We are partners, not beggars." Suddenly, the heavy double door swung open. A team of 6 lawyers in matching grey suits marched in, placing thick binders on the table. They didn't speak. They stood behind the empty chairs on the opposite side. Then, a man announced from the doorway, "Please rise for the chairman of Sterling Global and the CEO of Titan Holdings." Mark frowned. "Sterling Global? I thought we were dealing with Kensington." Beatrice went pale. "Sterling! That's Arthur Sterling, the billionaire. Why is he involved?" Before they could process the name, Arthur Sterling walked in. The room seemed to shrink around his presence. He didn't look at them. He walked to the head of the table and remained standing. "And," Arthur said, his voice booming, "my daughter, the CEO." Mark's breath hitched. He watched the doorway. A woman walked in. The click of her red-soled stilettos echoed on the marble floor. She wore a blood-red suit that fit her like a second skin. She radiated wealth, power, and danger. She walked to the chair opposite Mark. She placed a familiar black leather portfolio on the table. She looked up. Mark's mouth fell open. Beatrice dropped her pen. Chloe gasped audibly. It was Eleanor. But it wasn't the Eleanor they knew. This wasn't the waitress. This was a queen. "Hello, Mark," Eleanor said, her voice smooth and cold as ice. "I believe we have some unfinished business, and I'm not talking about the dinner dishes." Mark stood up, knocking his chair over. "Elena? What? What are you doing here?" "Who?" "Sit down, Mr. Rutherford," Arthur Sterling barked. "You're in the presence of my daughter, Elena Sterling, sole heiress to the Sterling Empire." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of 3 worlds shattering at once. Elena smiled. "Now, let's talk about this merger. Or should I say, acquisition." The air in the conference room was so thin it felt like the oxygen had been vacuumed out. Mark Rutherford stared at the woman in the red suit. His brain couldn't reconcile the images. Elena, the waitress, who wore oversized sweaters and made hot cocoa on rainy nights, and Elena Sterling, the shark sitting across from him with a gaze that could cut glass. "Sterling?" Beatrice whispered, her face draining of color until her foundation looked like a mask. She looked at Arthur, then at Elena. This is a joke, a cruel prank." "I assure you, Mrs. Rutherford," Arthur said, taking a seat at the head of the table and leaning back comfortably. "My checkbook has no sense of humor." "But you said your father was a mechanic," Mark blurted out, his voice cracking like a teenager's. "You said he fixed cars in Ohio." Elena didn't blink. She opened the leather portfolio in front of her. "I said he fixes things. Sometimes he fixes broken engines. Sometimes he fixes broken companies. And sometimes," she paused, her eyes locking onto Mark's, "he destroys things that are beyond repair." "Why?" Mark asked, clutching the edge of the table. "Why did you lie to me for 2 years?" "I didn't lie, Mark. I omitted," Elena said calmly. "I wanted to know if you loved me. Just Elena. Not the money, not the jet, not the empire. And for a while I thought you did." She gestured to the empty space on her ring finger. "But we saw how that ended. Now, if you're done gasping, I have a company to acquire." Beatrice, ever the survivor, straightened her spine. She forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. "Well," she smoothed her skirt. "This is unexpected. But ultimately it's good news, isn't it? We're family, Elena. Technically, you're still a Rutherford until the papers are processed. This makes the merger even smoother. We can keep it all in the family." Arthur let out a dry, barking laugh. "The audacity is impressive, madam. I'll give you that." "We are here to discuss business," Elena cut in, silencing her father with a subtle hand wave. "You are under the impression that Titan Holdings wants to merge with Rutherford Group, that you will retain your seats on the board, that you will receive a payout of $50 million. "That was the agreement with the Kensington reps," Chloe said, trying to sound tough but failing. "The Kensington reps were placeholders," Elena said. She pulled a document from her folder and slid it across the table. It spun perfectly, stopping right in front of Mark. The offer has changed. Mark looked down at the document. His eyes widened. $1, he whispered. Excuse me, Beatrice shrieked. She snatched the paper from Mark. Acquisition price, $1. This is an insult. Our assets alone are worth $40 million. Your reported assets are worth $40 million, Elena corrected. But let's talk about your liabilities. Let's talk about the things you discuss at the dinner table when you think the help isn't listening. Elena tapped a manicured fingernail on the table. Item 1, she said. The factory in Vietnam. You've been bypassing safety regulations for 3 years to save 15% on overhead. I remember you bragging about bribing the local inspector, Mark. You said, those people are lucky to have jobs. Who cares about the ventilation? Mark went pale. I never. I have the dates recorded, Elena said coldly, and my father's investigators confirmed it this morning. If that goes public, your stock goes to 0 overnight, and you go to prison. Beatrice was trembling now. You can't prove that. Item 2, Eleanor continued, ignoring her. The Cayman accounts. Chloe, you love to talk about your tax-free shopping sprees. You're funneling company profits into a shell corporation named Blue Sky Ventures to avoid U.S. taxes. That's tax fraud. Federal prison time, 5 to 10 years. Chloe dropped her phone. It hit the carpet with a dull thud. And item 3, Elena said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. The loans. You're leveraged to the hilt. You owe the bank $20 million due next month. You were banking on this merger to pay it off. Without this deal, the Rutherford Group is bankrupt by February 1st. Elena leaned forward. So, here is the new deal. Titan Holdings acquires Rutherford Group for $1. We assume your debts, we take your assets, and you 3 walk away. No board seats, no golden parachutes, no company cars. You leave with what you have in your pockets. I won't sign that, Beatrice hissed, slamming her hand on the table. I built this company. I won't let a spiteful little girl steal it from me. Elena stood up slowly. She looked 10 feet tall. Then don't sign. Walk out that door. But the moment you do, I release the safety reports to the press. I send the tax files to the IRS. And I call the bank, which, by the way, my father owns a controlling interest in. And I tell them to call in your loans immediately. She checked her diamond watch. You have 5 minutes. After that, I destroy you. The silence stretched, agonizing and brutal. Mark looked at his mother. Beatrice looked at the wall, her chest heaving. She realized she had been outplayed. She had treated Elena like furniture, and now the furniture was dropping a piano on her head. Mark, Beatrice whispered, her voice defeated. Sign it. Mum, sign it, or we go to jail. With a shaking hand, Mark picked up the pen. He looked at Eleanor one last time. He saw no love in her eyes, only the cold, hard reflection of his own mistakes. He signed the paper. Mark Rutherford, CEO. He pushed it back to her. Are you happy? He asked hoarsely. Elena picked up the document. She blew on the ink, just as Beatrice had told her to do the night before. Happy, Elena mused. No, Mark, I'm not happy. I'm pregnant, I'm divorced, and the father of my child is a coward. But I am satisfied. She turned to Arthur. We're done here. Arthur stood up, buttoning his jacket. Pleasure doing business. Security will escort you out of the building. You have 1 hour to clear your personal effects from your offices. Anything left behind becomes property of Titan Holdings. 1 hour? Chloe cried. But my things, my paintings. Property of Titan, Arthur said, turning his back on them. As Eleanor walked toward the door, Mark lunged forward. Eleanor, wait, the baby. We need to talk about the baby. Eleanor stopped. She didn't turn around. "Speak to my lawyers, Mark, but I warn you, custody battles are expensive. And as of 1 minute ago," she held up the signed contract, "you're unemployed." The walk from the conference room to the elevators felt like a funeral procession for the Rutherfords. Security guards, burly men in Titan uniforms, flanked them, ensuring they didn't touch anything on their way out. "This is a nightmare," Chloe sobbed, clutching her designer bag. "Mum, do something." "Shut up, Chloe," Beatrice snapped, though she looked like she was about to faint. "I need to think. We need a strategy." "We have no money, Mum," Mark shouted, pressing the elevator button violently. "She took it all. She took the company." "We have the name," Beatrice said, her eyes darting around frantically. "We have the Rutherford name, and we have the truth about the baby. If she wants to play dirty, we'll play dirtier. We'll go to the press. We'll spin this. Billionaire heiress steals family company, denies father access to child. The public loves a victim, Mark." The elevator doors opened. They stepped into the lobby of the Kensington building, but Elena was 2 steps ahead of them. As the Rutherfords stepped out of the elevator, a wall of flashbulbs went off. It was blinding. Dozens of reporters, cameramen, and journalists were crowded into the lobby, held back by a velvet rope. "Mr. Rutherford, Mr. Rutherford, is it true? Did you force your pregnant wife to sign divorce papers on Christmas Eve? Mrs. Rutherford, comment on the allegations of fraud? Mark, why did you dump the sterling heiress?" Mark threw his hands up to shield his eyes. "What? How do they know?" A reporter from the New York Chronicle shoved a microphone in his face. "We received a copy of the divorce settlement signed last night," the reporter shouted. "It stipulates a $10,000 payout for irreconcilable differences." "Did you really offer Elena Sterling 10 grand to walk away?" Beatrice shoved the microphone away. "No comment! Get out of our way!" But they were trapped. Another reporter, a woman from a major news network, stepped forward. She held up a tablet. "We're live right now. Mr. Rutherford, sources say you didn't know your wife was Arthur Sterling's daughter. Did you marry her for love? Or were you just disappointed she wasn't rich enough for you?" "I loved her," Mark yelled, losing his composure. "I didn't know who she was." "So you divorced her because she was poor?" the reporter pressed. "And now that you know she's a billionaire, do you regret it?" The crowd laughed. It was a cruel, mocking sound. Beatrice grabbed Mark's arm. "Don't answer them! Run!" They pushed through the crowd, cameras capturing every sweaty, terrified moment. They burst out the revolving doors onto the street, only to find their company car was gone. In its place was a tow truck. A man was hooking up the Rutherford executive limousine. "Hey!" Mark screamed, running toward the driver. "That's my car! Put it down!" The driver looked at a clipboard. Order came in from the new owners. Titan Holdings. All company vehicles are to be repossessed immediately. "I am the CEO!" Mark screamed. "Not according to this," the driver said, continuing to winch the car up. It began to rain, a cold, freezing drizzle. The Rutherfords stood on the sidewalk, shivering. Their coats were in the office upstairs, which they could no longer access. Passers-by were stopping to take videos on their phones. Rutherford Ruined was already trending on Twitter. Mark's phone buzzed. It was a notification from his banking app. Alert. Joint account frozen due to pending legal investigation. "Mom," Mark said, his voice trembling. "My cards are locked." Beatrice checked hers. "Mine too." They were stranded in Manhattan, in the rain, with no car, no money, and the entire world laughing at them. High above, on the 40th floor, Elena watched the scene from the window. She held a cup of hot tea in her hands. Arthur stood beside her. "Brutal," he commented, watching the tow truck drive away with the limo. "But necessary. They cared so much about image. Elena said softly. Now their image is the only thing they have left, and it's destroyed. What now? Arthur asked. We have the company. We have the revenge. Do you want to go home? Elena turned away from the window. She walked over to the large boardroom table where the signed acquisition papers lay. Not yet, she said. Beatrice isn't done. I know her. She's like a cockroach. She'll survive the nuclear blast and try to bite your ankle. She's broke, Elena. What can she do? She mentioned the baby, Elena said, her hand going to her stomach again. She'll try to use the baby as leverage. She'll sue for custody. She'll try to paint me as an unfit mother, a mentally unstable rich girl who ran away. Arthur's eyes narrowed. Let her try. I'll bury her in legal paperwork for 50 years. No, Elena said. I don't want a legal battle that lasts for years. I want this ended. Permanently. She looked at her father. I need you to organize a gala, the Sterling New Year's Eve charity ball. We usually hold that in London, Arthur noted. This year, we hold it here, in New York, and I want you to invite everyone, the press, the partners, the elite. And the Rutherfords? Arthur raised an eyebrow. Especially the Rutherfords, Elena smiled coldly. Beatrice won't be able to resist. She'll think it's her chance to make a scene, to beg for mercy, or to try to blackmail me in public. She's addicted to the spotlight. And when she gets there, Elena said, I'm going to reveal the final secret. The one thing Mark doesn't know about why I really left the diner that day 2 years ago. Arthur looked confused. I thought you left to find yourself. That's part of it, Elena said. But there's more. Mark thinks he's the victim of a misunderstanding. At the ball, I'm going to show the world that the Rutherfords aren't just snobs, they're criminals. And I'm going to put the final nail in the coffin on live television. You have a plan, Arthur stated. I have a video, Elena corrected. A recording from the security camera in their own dining room. The one they forgot was installed. Arthur grinned. It was a predatory, shark-like grin. I'll send the invitations. Down on the street, Beatrice huddled under the awning of a coffee shop, shivering. We're not done, Mark, she chattered, her teeth clicking together. She thinks she won? She has no idea. Mum, give it up, Mark groaned. We lost. We never lose, Beatrice snapped. She pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her purse. It was an invitation to the Sterling New Year's Eve ball. It had been sent to Mark's email automatically before the system locked him out, and she had printed it at the hotel business center before they left. She's hosting a ball, Beatrice said, her eyes gleaming with madness. New Year's Eve. Everyone will be there. So, Beatrice smiled, and it was terrifying. We're going to crash it, and we're going to tell everyone that Elena isn't just pregnant. We're going to tell them she's insane, that she faked her identity to entrap you, that she's unfit. We'll make a scene so big they'll have to settle with us just to make us go away. That sounds dangerous, Chloe said. It's our only shot, Beatrice said. Get up. We have a party to prepare for. New Year's Eve in New York City is electric, but inside the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, the atmosphere was nuclear. The Sterling Gala was the ticket of the decade. Billionaires, senators, and A-list celebrities mingled under gold leaf ceilings, sipping champagne that cost more than a Honda Civic. Elena stood on the balcony overlooking the ballroom. She wore a gown of shimmering gold sequins that pooled around her feet like liquid metal. It was a statement. She was no longer the mourning wife in navy blue, nor the vengeful CEO in crimson. She was the trophy. She was the gold standard. They're here, Arthur said, appearing beside her. He adjusted his tuxedo cuffs. Security let them through the service entrance, just as you instructed. They think they sneaked in." "Do they look desperate?" Elena asked, swirling her sparkling water. "They look like drowning rats in designer suits," Arthur replied. "Beatrice is wearing a dress from 3 seasons ago. The horror." Elena smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Let's go down. It's almost midnight." Down on the floor, the Rutherfords were huddled near the shrimp tower. They stuck out like sore thumbs. While the other guests were relaxed and joyous, Mark, Beatrice, and Chloe were sweating, their eyes darting around nervously. "This is it," Beatrice whispered, clutching a glass of wine she hadn't paid for. "When the countdown starts, everyone will be looking at the stage. That's when we strike. We get on that stage, we grab the microphone, and we tell the world that Arthur Sterling is holding his mentally unstable daughter hostage and keeping her from her husband." "Mum, look at her," Mark said, his voice hollow. He was staring up at the grand staircase. Elena was descending, arm in arm with her father. The crowd parted for them like the Red Sea. She glowed. She looked untouchable. Mark felt a physical ache in his chest, not just regret for the money, but a sudden, piercing realization that she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, and he had thrown her away for a merger that didn't exist. "Focus, Mark," Beatrice hissed, pinching his arm. "She's a fraud. Remember the plan." As the clock struck 11:50 p.m., the music lowered. Arthur Sterling took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice boomed over the speakers, "thank you for joining us to ring in the new year. Before the countdown begins, my daughter, Elena, has a few words." Elena stepped up to the microphone. The room went silent. "Thank you," she said, her voice clear and melodic. "This year has been one of transition for me. I learned that trust is expensive and loyalty is rare. I learned that some people will burn you to keep themselves warm." "Liar!" The shriek cut through the silence. Beatrice Rutherford pushed through the crowd, dragging Mark and Chloe with her. She scrambled up the stairs to the stage, looking wild-eyed. Security guards moved to intercept, but Eleanor held up a hand. "Let them speak." Beatrice grabbed the microphone stand. She looked out at the sea of faces. Faces of people she wanted to impress, people she wanted to be. "This woman," Beatrice panted, pointing a shaking finger at Eleanor, "is a liar. She is my son's wife. She ran away after a mental breakdown. She is pregnant with my grandchild, and she is unfit to be a mother. She deceived us all." A murmur of shock rippled through the crowd. Phones were raised, recording the meltdown. Mark stepped forward, looking at Elena with pleading eyes. "Elena, please, come home. We can work this out. Think of the baby." "The baby," Elena repeated, her face unreadable. "You care about the baby now, Mark. You didn't care much when you handed me divorce papers as a Christmas gift." "I didn't know," Mark cried. "If I had known—" "If you had known I was a Sterling, you mean?" Elena finished. "She's twisting it," Beatrice yelled. "She's unstable. We are the victims here. The Rutherfords are a respectable family." Elena looked at the technician in the sound booth and nodded. "Respectable," Elena mused. "Let's see about that." Behind her, a massive LED screen that was set up for the countdown flickered to life, but instead of a clock, it showed a grainy, high-definition video. It was the dining room of the Rutherford estate. The date stamp in the corner read December 24th, 7:00 p.m. The crowd gasped. It was the Christmas dinner. On the screen, Beatrice was cutting her goose. Her voice boomed through the ballroom speakers, crisp and clear. "Mark, darling, have you told her yet? Or are we going to pretend to enjoy this charade until dessert?" The audience watched in horrified fascination as the scene played out. They saw the envelope. They heard the insults. "You are a liability, Elena. A social anchor dragging my son to the bottom of the ocean." Mark closed his eyes on stage. He couldn't watch. But the video didn't stop at the divorce signing. It jumped forward to after Elena had walked out into the snow. The camera was still rolling. On the screen, Beatrice was sipping wine, looking triumphant. "Finally," Video Beatrice said. "Now that the trash is gone, we can focus on the real issue." "The audit," Video Mark said nervously. "Mum, if the merger happens, the auditors are going to see the books. They're going to see the $2 million missing from the employee pension fund." The room gasped. In the real world, Beatrice froze. On the screen, Beatrice laughed. "Don't be stupid, Mark. We'll use the signing bonus from the Kensington deal to plug the hole in the pension fund before anyone notices. And if they do notice, we blame it on the incompetent accounting of the previous administration. Or," she paused, smiling wickedly, "we blame it on Eleanor. We say she had access to the accounts. Who are they going to believe? Us or the waitress?" The video cut to black. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. Elena turned to Beatrice, whose face was now a mask of sheer terror. "You were right about one thing, Beatrice," Elena said into the microphone. "The auditors did see the books. My auditors. And they found the missing pension money and the wire transfers to the Caymans." Elena gestured to the back of the room. "I believe you know Detective Miller." The doors swung open. 4 NYPD officers marched in, followed by 2 federal agents in windbreakers that read FBI. "Beatrice Rutherford, Mark Rutherford, Chloe Rutherford," the lead agent announced. "You are under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud." "No!" Beatrice screamed, backing away. "This is a setup. That video is fake. Mark, do something." But Mark was done. He sank to his knees on the stage, burying his face in his hands. As the officers cuffed Beatrice, she thrashed and screamed, her dignity completely gone. Chloe was weeping silently as she was led away. Mark was the last to be cuffed. He looked up at Eleanor. "I loved you," he whispered. "In the beginning I really did." Eleanor looked down at him. There was no hate in her eyes anymore, only pity. "I know," she said softly, "but you loved your mother's approval more." "Goodbye, Mark." They dragged him away. The flashbulbs popped like fireworks. Elena turned back to the crowd. The clock struck midnight. "Happy New Year," she said. And as the balloons dropped and the crowd cheered, Arthur Sterling hugged his daughter. "You did good, kid," he said. "You did good." The nursery in the Sterling penthouse was painted a soft cloud grey. Outside, the first snow of the following winter was beginning to fall, dusting Central Park in white. Elena sat in the rocking chair, holding a small bundle wrapped in a blue cashmere blanket. Arthur Sterling, the man who made economies tremble, was currently making silly faces at the infant. "He has your nose," Arthur whispered, afraid to wake the sleeping baby. "He has your chin," Elena smiled, stroking the baby's cheek. "Determination." "What did you name him?" Arthur asked. "You still haven't told me the middle name." "Leo," Elena said. "Leo Arthur Sterling." Arthur's eyes grew misty. He cleared his throat, trying to maintain his composure. "Strong name, a good name for a CEO." "He can be whatever he wants to be," Elena said firmly. "A CIO, a painter, a mechanic, as long as he's kind." "What about them?" Arthur asked, his voice hardening slightly. "The trial ended yesterday," Elena said, looking out the window at the snow. "Beatrice got 15 years, fraud and embezzlement. Chloe got 5. And Mark?" She paused. "Mark got 8 years. He pleaded guilty. He sent a letter." "Did you read it?" No, Elena said. She looked at the fireplace, where a fire was crackling warmly. I burned it. She looked down at little Leo. He yawned, his tiny hand gripping her finger. The Rutherfords were a memory, a scar that had faded. They had wanted a legacy, a name, a dynasty. In their greed, they lost it all. And Eleanor? She had found the one thing money couldn't buy, and the one thing they had tried to take from her. She had a family. Look at the snow, Leo, she whispered to her son. It's clean. It's a fresh start. Arthur put his hand on her shoulder. Dinner is ready. Chef made roast goose. Elena laughed, a genuine bubbling sound. Tell him to send it back, she said, standing up with her son in her arms. I'm in the mood for pizza. And that is the ultimate revenge. The Rutherfords didn't just lose their money. They lost their freedom and their legacy, all because they couldn't see the value of the person right in front of them. Elena burned the letter, closing that chapter forever and choosing her son over the past. What do you think? Did Mark deserve a second chance, or did he get exactly what was coming to him? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of drama, justice, and karma, please give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit that bell icon so you never miss a new story. We have a crazy cheating revenge story coming up next week that you won't believe. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one. They say money changes people, but for Marcus Thorne, it just revealed the monster he always was. It was Christmas Eve, the one night of the year meant for family and forgiveness. But in a penthouse overlooking the freezing city streets, there was no warmth, only a brutal betrayal. A pregnant wife, cast out into the snow with nothing but the clothes on her back. A billionaire husband who thought he was untouchable. And a mysterious man in a Santa suit ringing a bell on the corner, watching it all unfold. Marcus thought he was discarding trash. He didn't realize he was mocking the most powerful man in the city, his own father-in-law. You are not going to believe how this karma hits. The panoramic windows of the penthouse suite at the top of the obsidian tower offered a view of the city that most people would kill for. Down below, New York was a grid of glittering lights, dusted with the fresh, relentless snow of Christmas Eve. Inside, the air smelled of expensive pine, scotch, and the distinct metallic scent of indifference. Elena Thorne sat on the edge of the velvet beige sofa, her hand resting protectively over her 7-month baby bump. She was 24, with hair the color of roasted chestnuts and eyes that usually sparkled, but tonight they were dull with anxiety. She had spent 3 hours preparing dinner, a roast duck with cherry glaze, Marcus's favorite, but the food sat cold and untouched on the mahogany dining table. The only sound in the room was the rhythmic tapping of a finger against glass. Marcus Thorne, 32, a man whose tech empire was currently valued in the high 9 figures, stood by the window. He was handsome in a sharp, predatory way. His jaw was square, his suit was a bespoke charcoal Armani, and his eyes were as cold as the glass he was leaning against. "Elena," he said, not turning around. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that made the air in the room feel thin. "We need to stop pretending." Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. "Pretending? Marcus, it's Christmas Eve. I have your gift. I thought we could—" "I don't want a gift," he cut her off, turning around. He took a sip of his scotch, grimacing slightly. "And I don't want this." He gestured vaguely at the room, the tree, and finally at her. "I don't understand," Elena whispered. She shifted, her back aching from the pregnancy. "Is this about the gala last week? I apologized for leaving early, Marcus. My feet were swelling, and the doctor said, "It's not about the gala, Elena. It's about the brand." Marcus walked over to the coffee table and picked up a thick manila envelope. He tossed it onto the sofa next to her. It landed with a heavy thud. "What is this?" "Divorce papers," Marcus said casually, as if he were ordering coffee. "My legal team drew them up this morning. I signed them an hour ago." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Elena stared at the envelope, her breath catching in her throat. Divorce? But, Marcus, the baby. We're having a daughter in 2 months. Marcus let out a short, derisive laugh. He sat in the armchair opposite her, crossing his legs. "The baby. Right. See, that's part of the problem. When I married you, Elena, you were the quiet, sweet orphan girl. No baggage, no family drama. Just a pretty face to have on my arm. A blank slate." He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "But now, you're emotional. You're needy. And frankly, this whole pregnancy look." He looked her up and down with open disgust. "It doesn't fit the aesthetic I'm going for in the new year. I'm taking the company public in Q1. I need a power couple image, not whatever domestic mess this is." Elena felt tears prick her eyes, hot and stinging. "I'm your wife, not an accessory. I'm carrying your child." "And you'll be compensated for it," Marcus said, checking his Rolex. "The prenup is ironclad, as you know. You get a flat settlement of $50,000. But, considering the timing, I'm feeling generous. I'll throw in an extra 10 grand if you leave tonight without making a scene." "Leave?" Elena gasped, her voice cracking. "Tonight? It's Christmas Eve. It's 10 degrees outside. I have nowhere to go." Marcus stood up, his patience evaporating. "That's not entirely true. There are plenty of motels in Queens. And you're not an orphan anymore, are you? Didn't you say you found your long-lost father's address last year? Maybe go cry to him." "You know I never met him," she sobbed. "I don't even know if he's alive. I have no family, Marcus. You are my family." "Not anymore." He pulled his phone out of his pocket. "Security is already on the way up to escort you out. You can take your personal items, clothing and toiletries. The jewelry stays. The car stays." "You can't do this," she pleaded, standing up, her hands trembling. "Please, Marcus, just let me stay until the baby is born. The guest room. Anywhere. Don't throw us out on Christmas." Marcus looked at her with a chilling emptiness. There was no anger, which was almost worse. There was just nothing. "You're cluttering my space, Elena, and I have guests arriving in an hour. Jessica Vance is coming over." Elena froze. "Jessica, your PR consultant?" "She's a bit more than that now," Marcus smirked. "She understands the vision. She fits the life. Now pack your bag. You have 10 minutes before security drags you out." He turned his back on her and poured another drink, humming a Christmas carol under his breath. Elena stood there for a moment, the devastation washing over her like a physical blow. She looked at the man she had loved, the man she thought would be the father of her child. She realized then that he wasn't a man at all. He was a hollow shell painted in gold. She didn't scream. She didn't throw things. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, a sudden, cold resolve settling in her chest. She grabbed the divorce papers, not to sign, but to keep as evidence of his cruelty. She walked to the bedroom, packed a single duffel bag with her warmest sweaters and her prenatal vitamins, and walked back out. Marcus didn't even look up as the elevator doors closed between them. The lobby of the Obsidian Tower was a fortress of marble and gold. A massive 20-foot Christmas tree stood in the center, decorated with Swarovski crystals. It was beautiful, cold and uninviting, just like Marcus. Elena stepped out of the elevator, her heavy duffel bag straining her shoulder. The head of security, a man named Joe, who had always been kind to her, looked at the floor, unable to meet her eyes. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Thorne," Joe mumbled as he held the glass door open for her. Mr. Thorne gave strict instructions. "Your access card has been deactivated." "It's okay, Joe," Elena said, her voice hollow. "It's not your fault. Merry Christmas." She stepped out into the biting wind. The cold hit her instantly, cutting through her wool coat. The snow was falling harder now, thick white flakes that stuck to her eyelashes. Fifth Avenue was relatively quiet. Most people were already home with their families, drinking cocoa and opening presents. Elena walked 2 blocks, her boots crunching on the salted pavement. She had $60,000 promised in a settlement she hadn't received yet. In her bank account, she had maybe $200. Marcus had frozen the joint cards the moment he asked for the divorce. She stopped in front of a luxury department store, Bergdorf Goodman, staring at the window display. It showed a happy, mechanical family opening gifts. The irony made her stomach turn. "Spare a moment for the children," a deep, gravelly voice said. Elena turned. Standing near the entrance of the store, ringing a brass bell, was a Salvation Army Santa. But he didn't look like the usual volunteers. He was a mountain of a man, tall and broad-shouldered. His Santa suit was made of high-quality velvet, not cheap felt, and his beard, thick, white, and magnificent, looked real. He was standing next to a red kettle, but his eyes were fixed on Elena. They were blue, piercing, and strangely familiar. Elena felt a magnetic pull. She walked over, fumbling in her pocket. She pulled out a $20 bill, one of the last few she had. "I don't have much," she said, her voice trembling as she stuffed the bill into the kettle. "But I hope it helps someone." The Santa stopped ringing the bell. He looked at the bill, then up at her tear-stained face. He looked at her stomach. "You are generous for someone who looks like she just lost the world, child," the Santa said. His voice was warm, like a crackling fire. "Why are you out here in this storm? You should be home." Elena let out a bitter laugh that turned into a sob. "I don't have a home, not anymore. My husband, he decided he wanted a new life for Christmas." The Santa's eyes darkened. The twinkle vanished, replaced by a storm of its own. "He kicked you out? In this weather? While you are carrying a child?" "He's a powerful man," Elena whispered, looking back toward the obsidian tower, looming in the distance. "He said I don't fit his image." "Image?" the Santa scoffed. He reached into his red velvet coat and pulled out a thermos. "Here, hot chocolate. It's Swiss. Drink." Elena hesitated, but the cold was seeping into her bones. She took the thermos. "Thank you, I'm Elena." "I know. I mean, nice to meet you, Elena." The Santa corrected himself quickly. "I go by Nick. Just Nick." As Elena sipped the chocolate, which was rich and warming, a sleek black Bentley pulled up to the curb right in front of them. The window rolled down. It was Marcus, and in the passenger seat, looking glamorous in a white fur coat, was Jessica Vance. Marcus leaned out, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "Well, look at this. You found your level, Elena. Hanging out with the beggars already?" Jessica giggled, covering her mouth. "Oh, Marcus, don't be mean. Maybe she's asking Santa for a new husband." Elena stiffened, gripping the thermos tight. She wanted to scream, but she was frozen with humiliation. The Santa, however, stepped forward. He moved with a speed and grace that belied his size. He walked right up to the Bentley's window. He didn't look like a jolly elf anymore. He looked like a titan. "You must be Marcus Thorne," the Santa said, his voice low and dangerous. Marcus sneered. "Get back, old man, or I'll have you arrested for harassment. Do you know who I am?" I know exactly who you are, the Santa said. You're a man who builds towers of glass and thinks they make him a king. But glass breaks, Marcus. It breaks very easily. Marcus laughed. Is that a threat? From a guy in a costume? Elena, enjoy your night on the street. I'm going to the plaza for drinks. He rolled up the window and the Bentley sped off, spraying slush onto the sidewalk, narrowly missing Elena's boots. Elena burst into tears. He's going to win. He always wins. The Santa turned back to her. He placed a heavy, gloved hand on her shoulder. It felt protective, solid. No, Elena, he said softly. He has already lost. He just doesn't know it yet. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a card. It wasn't a business card. It was a thick, cream-colored card with a gold embossed emblem of a lion. There was an address on it, a townhouse on the Upper East Side. My shift is over, the Santa said, and I happen to know that this house has plenty of empty rooms, a warm fire, and a housekeeper who makes excellent strudel. You are not sleeping in a motel tonight. I can't, Elena shook her head. I can't take it charity. It's not charity, the Santa said, and for a second his voice cracked with emotion. It's family. Trust me. Just for tonight. Elena looked at the card. The name on the gate would read Sterling, the same name she had been born with. But she didn't know that yet. She looked at the old man's kind eyes and felt, for the first time that night, a spark of hope. Okay, she whispered. Okay, Nick. The Santa smiled, pulled out a phone that looked far too expensive for a street charity worker, and dialed a number. Alfred, he spoke into the phone. Bring the car around, the Rolls. We have a VIP guest. The interior of the Rolls-Royce Phantom was a world away from the freezing New York slush. It smelled of aged leather and lavender. The heating was set to a perfect 72 degrees, instantly soothing Elena's shivering frame. Nick, or the man she knew as the Salvation Army Santa, sat across from her, having removed the fake beard to reveal a well-groomed silver goatee and a strong, square jawline that had aged with dignity. He poured a glass of sparkling water from a crystal decanter and handed it to her. Alfred, the man said to the driver, his voice losing the jovial Santa affectation and returning to a commanding baritone. Call Dr. Evans. Tell him to meet us at the residence. I want him to check on a pregnant woman. Possible hypothermia and stress. Yes, Mr. Sterling, Alfred replied smoothly from the front seat. Elena froze, the glass halfway to her lips. Sterling, did he say? Mr. Sterling? The man sighed, leaning back into the plush leather. He looked tired, the weight of years evident in his eyes. My name is Arthur Sterling. I apologize for the deception, Elena. But sometimes disguises are the only way to see the world as it truly is. People lie to billionaires. They don't lie to street Santas. Elena's mind raced. Arthur Sterling was a name everyone in New York knew. He was the Titan of steel, a man who had built half the skyscrapers in Manhattan and owned shipping lines across the Atlantic. He was worth billions. And he had been ringing a bell on a street corner. Why? Elena asked, bewildered. Why did you help me? Why bring me here? Arthur looked at her, his blue eyes softening with a pain that looked decades old. Because, child, you have your mother's nose, and her stubbornness. Before Elena could ask what he meant, the car glided through a massive wrought-iron gate on the Upper East Side. The townhouse was more of a palace, a 5-story limestone structure that radiated old money. Inside, the foyer was dominated by a double staircase and a crystal chandelier the size of a small car, but Elena's eyes were drawn immediately to a massive oil painting hanging above the fireplace in the grand salon. It was a portrait of a woman. She was young, beautiful, with cascading chestnut hair and eyes that sparkled with mischief. She was wearing a locket, a silver oval with a small sapphire in the center. Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her throat. She pulled out a necklace from under her sweater. It was the identical locket. The one thing her mother had left her before she died in that car accident 20 years ago. "Her name was Sarah," Arthur said, his voice trembling as he stood behind Eleanor. "She was my daughter, my only child. She ran away 25 years ago, fell in love with a musician, a good man, but a poor one. I was arrogant back then. I told her if she chose him, she chose poverty. I cut her off." Tears streamed down Arthur's face. "I tried to find her a few years later. I hired investigators. They told me there had been a crash, that she and her husband were gone. They said there was a child, a girl, but the system had swallowed her up. I have spent every Christmas since then standing on that corner, ringing that bell, hoping that maybe, just maybe, karma would bring me a second chance." He turned to Elena, tears shining in his eyes. "When you walked up to my kettle, I saw her, and then I saw the locket." Elena was shaking. The story she had told herself, that she was unwanted, abandoned, shattered. She wasn't abandoned. She was lost. "Grandfather," she whispered, the word feeling foreign on her tongue. Arthur opened his arms and Eleanor collapsed into them. For the first time since her husband had thrown her out, she felt safe. She felt found. "You are home, Elena," Arthur whispered into her hair. "And no one will ever hurt you again. Especially not that insect." Marcus Thorne. That night, Elena didn't sleep in a motel. She slept in a canopy bed with Egyptian cotton sheets, but before she drifted off, Arthur sat by her bedside. "Rest now," he said. "Recover. Focus on the baby. But know this. Marcus believes he is a shark. He is about to learn that he is swimming in a tank with a kraken. Do not tell him where you are. Let him think you are destitute. Let him think he has won. The victory will make his fall so much sweeter." 3 weeks had passed since Christmas Eve. In the gleaming headquarters of Thorne Tech, Marcus Thorne was pacing his office like a caged tiger. The thud of his Italian leather shoes on the hardwood floor was the only sound in the room. Jessica Vance sat on his desk, filing her nails. She was wearing a dress that cost more than most people's cars, purchased with Marcus's corporate card. "Relax, babe," Jessica said, not looking up. "So the loan is delayed. It happens. The banks are just doing their due diligence for the IPO." "It's not just delayed, Jessica," Marcus snapped, loosening his tie. "It's stalled. Henderson at Chase has been dodging my calls for 3 days, and the zoning permit for the new server farm in Jersey, denied, this morning, without explanation." "Bureaucracy," Jessica shrugged. "Just bribe someone. Isn't that how this works?" "I tried," Marcus yelled, slamming his hand on the desk. "I sent a gift to the commissioner. It was returned, unopened. That never happens." Marcus walked to the window, looking out at the city he thought he owned. He felt a prickle on the back of his neck, a sensation of being watched. Since Christmas, everything had felt difficult. Deals that were sure things suddenly fell through. Suppliers suddenly had stock shortages. His PR team was working overtime to bury rumors that Thorne Tech was liquidity poor. His intercom buzzed. It was his secretary, her voice shaking. "Mr. Thorne, Mr. Henderson from the bank is on line 1. He says it's urgent." Marcus snatched the phone up. "Henderson, finally. Look, I need that 50 million released by Friday, or the IPO valuation takes a hit. What is the holdup?" "Mr. Thorne," Henderson's voice was icy, devoid of the usual sycophantic warmth. I'm afraid the loan committee has flagged your application. There are irregularities in your collateral. Irregularities? I put up the obsidian tower. It's worth 200 million. Not anymore, Henderson said. It seems there's a lien on the land title, an old clause from the original sale of the bedrock rights. We missed it in the initial review, but the actual owner of the land has asserted their rights. The actual owner? Marcus felt cold sweat trickle down his back. I own the land. You own the building, Mr. Thorne. You lease the land. It's a 99-year lease, but the owner has invoked a moral turpitude clause in the contract. They claim the tenant, you, has engaged in behavior damaging to the reputation of the property. Moral turpitude? Marcus laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. What is this? The 1800s? Who is the owner? A holding company called Nemesis Trust, Henderson replied. And because of this dispute, the bank is freezing your lines of credit, effective immediately. You have 48 hours to resolve the lien, or we call in the existing loans. The line went dead. Marcus stared at the phone. Nemesis Trust. He had never heard of them. What is it? Jessica asked, finally looking concerned. Marcus, you look pale. They froze the money, Marcus whispered. If I don't fix this by Friday, we can't make payroll. The IPO will collapse. The stock will go to zero. Well, fix it, Jessica snapped, hopping off the desk. I have a dress fitting for the gala on Saturday. You promised me this would be the event of the season. The gala. Marcus rubbed his temples. The Future of Tech Gala. He had invited the entire elite of New York. If he cancelled it, he would look weak. If he held it while bankrupt, he was a fraud. We hold the gala, Marcus said, his eyes hardening. I'll find a private investor. Someone who wants a piece of the pie before we go public. I'll sell a stake in the company if I have to. Good, Jessica said, grabbing her purse. I'm going to lunch. Don't stress, darling. You always win. You're Marcus Thorne. As she walked out, Marcus didn't see the love of his life. He saw a rat preparing to jump ship. Across town, in the library of the Sterling mansion, Arthur Sterling put down his phone. He was wearing a velvet smoking jacket, sitting by a roaring fire. He took the bait, Arthur said to the empty room. Elena was sitting in the corner armchair, reading a book on infant care. She looked healthier now. Her cheeks had colour, and the dark circles were gone. She was wearing a soft cashmere robe. He's going ahead with the gala? Elena asked. He has to. Arthur smiled grimly. His ego won't let him cancel. He thinks he can charm a shark into giving him money. He doesn't realize he's already bleeding in the water. He still doesn't know? He has no idea. He thinks Nemesis Trust is just some faceless corporation. He doesn't know Nemesis is the name of the Greek goddess of retribution. Arthur stood up and walked over to Eleanor. How are you feeling, my dear? Heavy, Eleanor smiled, rubbing her belly. She's kicking. I think she knows something is happening. She knows her grandfather is clearing the path for her, Arthur said, kissing Elena's forehead. By the way, have you decided on a name? I was thinking. Sarah, Elena said softly. After my mother. Arthur's eyes misted over. Sarah, it's perfect. Arthur, Elena said, her voice turning serious. I want to go to the gala. Arthur frowned. Elena, you're 8 months pregnant. It will be stressful. Marcus will be there. That woman will be there. I know, Elena said, a fire lighting behind her eyes that matched her grandfather's. But I need to see him. I need him to see me, not as the poor wife he threw away, but as a Sterling. I want to be there when you take him down. Arthur looked at her for a long moment. He saw the steel in her spine. She wasn't the victim anymore. Very well, Arthur nodded. But you won't just go. You will arrive. We need to get you a dress. And diamonds. Lots of diamonds. The week leading up to the gala was a blur of chaos for Marcus. He was burning through his personal savings to keep the lights on at the office. He fired 3 executives who asked too many questions about the finances. Jessica had spent $40,000 on earrings, and when he asked her to return them, she threw a vase at his head. He was sleeping 2 hours a night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the Santa from the street corner. Glass breaks very easily, the man had said. Stupid beggar, Marcus muttered to himself, popping a Xanax with a Scotch chaser. Superstitious nonsense. On the day of the gala, a massive snowstorm hit New York again. It was fitting. The city was white and cold, just like it had been the night he evicted Eleanor. He hadn't thought about her much, to be honest. He assumed she was in a shelter somewhere, or maybe back in whatever trailer park she came from. She was the past. Tonight was about the future. The venue was the grand ballroom at the Plaza Hotel. It was decked out in silver and blue, the colors of Thorn Tech. By 8 p.m., the room was full. Tech bros in hoodies and blazers mixed with old Wall Street money in tuxedos. Waiters circulated with champagne and caviar. Marcus stood at the entrance, a plastered smile on his face. Jessica was on his arm, looking stunning but annoyed. "Where are the heavy hitters?" she whispered. "I don't see the Vanderbilts. I don't see the Rockefellers." "They're coming," Marcus hissed. "Just smile." But they weren't coming. RSVP after RSVP had cancelled last minute. The room was full of mid-level managers and hangers-on, not the whales Marcus needed to save his company. Suddenly, the room went quiet. The chatter died down, replaced by a murmur of awe and confusion. The double doors at the top of the grand staircase swung open. A man stood there. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him like armor. He was older, with a silver goatee and broad shoulders. He radiated power so intense it was almost physical. It was Arthur Sterling, the Arthur Sterling, the man who hadn't been seen at a public social event in a decade. Marcus's jaw dropped. Arthur Sterling was the richest man in the state. If Marcus could get just 5 minutes with him, a photo op, a handshake, it would save the IPO. The stock would skyrocket just by association. "Oh my God!" Jessica gasped, squeezing Marcus's arm. "That's Sterling. Go talk to him." Marcus straightened his tie, his heart pounding. "I'm going." But Arthur wasn't alone. Descending the stairs on his arm was a woman. She was heavily pregnant, moving with a regal grace that commanded the attention of every soul in the room. She was wearing a custom-made midnight blue velvet gown that draped over her baby bump elegantly, shimmering like the night sky. Around her neck was a diamond necklace that looked heavy enough to sink a ship. The sterling sapphires, legendary jewels not seen since the 1920s. Her hair was swept up in an intricate chignon, but her face... Marcus stopped dead in his tracks. The champagne glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. It was Eleanor, but it wasn't the Eleanor he knew, the meek, quiet girl in comfortable sweaters. This woman was a queen. Her chin was high, her eyes were clear and sharp, and she looked at the room not with fear, but with total command. That's your wife," Jessica screeched, her voice cutting through the silence. "What is she doing with Arthur Sterling?" The whisper ran through the crowd like wildfire. "Is that Marcus's ex? Why is she with Sterling? Is she his mistress?" Arthur and Elena reached the bottom of the stairs. The crowd parted for them like the Red Sea. Arthur led her straight toward Marcus. Marcus couldn't move. His brain was misfiring. "Elena!" he choked out. Arthur Sterling stepped forward, towering over Marcus. Up close, Marcus saw the blue eyes, the piercing, judging blue eyes. The memory hit him like a freight train, the street corner, the bell, the Santa. I know exactly who you are. Marcus's face drained of all colour. He looked from Arthur to the Santa-like beard, then back to Arthur. You, Marcus whispered, his voice trembling. You were at the store. Good evening, Marcus, Arthur said, his voice booming enough for the nearby crowd to hear. I believe you have met my daughter. The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear a pin drop. Daughter? Marcus stammered. No, she's an orphan. She has no family. She was lost, Arthur corrected, his voice hard as steel. But she is found, and she is a Sterling, which makes the child she is carrying, my granddaughter, the heir to the Sterling Empire. Jessica Vance let out a gasp of horror. She looked at Eleanor, then at Marcus, and realized instantly that she had bet on the wrong horse. Eleanor stepped forward. She looked Marcus in the eye. Hello, Marcus. You said I didn't fit your image. You said you needed a power couple aesthetic. She gestured to the room, to the press photographers who were frantically snapping pictures of her and her billionaire father. Is this powerful enough for you? Elena asked softly. Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked around. His investors were looking at him with disgust. His friends were snickering. Mr. Sterling. Marcus tried to salvage the situation, sweating profusely. Sir, please. There has been a misunderstanding. Elena and I, we're just going through a rough patch. Hormones, you know. We can work this out. For the family. Family? Arthur let out a laugh that chilled the room. You threw your family into the snow on Christmas Eve, boy. You don't get to claim them now that you know what they are worth. Arthur reached into his tuxedo pocket and pulled out a document. By the way, Arthur said casually, I represent Nemesis Trust. We own the land under your tower. And as of this morning, we also purchased the majority of your outstanding debt from Chase Bank. Marcus felt his knees buckle. You bought my debt? I own you, Marcus, Arthur said, leaning in close. And I am calling in the loan. In full. Tonight. Marcus fell to his knees. It wasn't a figure of speech. He physically collapsed to the floor in his expensive tuxedo, surrounded by the shattered glass of his champagne flute. Please, Marcus begged, tears streaming down his face, oblivious to the cameras flashing. Please don't destroy me. I didn't destroy you, Elena said, looking down at him with pity, not hate. You destroyed yourself. We're just here to sweep up the glass. Suddenly, Elena gasped. She grabbed Arthur's arm, her face twisting in pain. A gush of water hit the floor, mixing with the champagne. Grandfather, she gasped. The baby. It's time. The grand ballroom of the plaza had transformed from a scene of opulent celebration into a theater of panic. The music had stopped. The waiters were frozen with trays of melting ice, and the flashbulbs of the paparazzi went off like strobe lights, blinding everyone in the vicinity. Clear the way, Arthur Sterling bellowed. His voice, usually calm and authoritative, cracked with the raw terror of a grandfather watching his legacy at risk. He scooped Eleanor up in his arms. Despite his age, the adrenaline of the moment gave him the strength of a man half his years. Alfred, get the car, now! Elena gripped the lapel of Arthur's tuxedo, her knuckles white. It's too early, she gasped, sweat beading on her forehead despite the chill of the air conditioning. It's too early, grandfather. She's ready to meet the world, Elena. Just breathe, Arthur soothed her, rushing toward the exit. The crowd parted, not out of respect this time, but out of fear of the sheer intensity radiating from the billionaire. Marcus stood alone in the center of the room, surrounded by shattered glass and the ruins of his reputation. He took a step forward, his instinct to follow, to control the narrative, kicking in. "Elena, wait!" he shouted, stumbling slightly. "I'm the father. I have rights." He was cut off by a wall of black suits, Arthur's personal security detail. Ex-Mossad agents who didn't care about American liability laws formed a phalanx between Marcus and the exit. "Mr. Thorne," the lead agent said, his voice flat, "if you take one more step, you will be removed from the premises. Physically." "I'm her husband," Marcus screamed, his face turning a mottled red. "That is my child." "Not anymore," a sharp, feminine voice said from behind him. Marcus spun around. Jessica Vance was standing there, her fur coat already buttoned up. She was typing furiously on her phone. "Jessica," Marcus pleaded, reaching for her. "You have to help me spin this. Call the Times. Tell them Sterling is kidnapping my wife. We can twist this." Jessica looked up, and the look in her eyes was one of pure, unadulterated disgust. It wasn't the disgust of a lover scorned. It was the disgust of a parasite realizing the host was dead. "Spin it?" She laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Marcus, look at Twitter. It's trending. Dash Thorne fraud. A Santa billionaire. You're done." The stock dropped 40% in after-hours trading in the last 10 minutes. By morning, Thorne Tech will be a penny stock. "We can fix it." Marcus grabbed her arm. "I just need—" "Don't touch me!" she shrieked, pulling away. "I'm not going down with you. I have a reputation. I'm deleting every photo of us from my Instagram. Consider this my resignation. And Marcus?" She paused, looking him up and down. "You owe me for the dress." She turned on her heel and marched out, the click-clack of her heels sounding like nails in a coffin. Marcus was left alone. The investors, men he had looked up to, men he had tried so hard to impress, were looking at him with open contempt. "Pathetic," he heard Charles Vanderbilt mutter as he walked past. Marcus sank into a chair, putting his head in his hands. The waiter approached him, not to offer a refill, but to hand him a bill. "Mr. Thorne," the waiter said stiffly, "the hotel manager requires payment for the event up front. The credit card on file was declined." Mount Sinai Hospital. The VIP wing. The scene in the delivery room was a stark contrast to the gala. It was quiet, focused, and filled with love. Arthur Sterling paced the hallway, his tuxedo jacket discarded, his shirt sleeves rolled up. He looked every minute of his age now, the exhaustion settling in. Inside the room, Elena was fighting the hardest battle of her life. The labor was fast and furious. "You're doing great, Elena," Dr. Evans said, monitoring the vitals. "The baby is small, but her heart rate is strong. One more push." "I can't," Elena sobbed, gripping the bed rails. "I'm alone. I can't do it alone." "You are not alone." Arthur burst into the room, ignoring the nurse's protest. He rushed to the bedside and took Elena's hand. His grip was rough, calloused, and warm. "I am here. Your mother is here in spirit. We are all here." Elena looked into her grandfather's blue eyes, the same eyes that had looked at her with kindness on a snowy street corner when she had nothing. She drew a breath that seemed to pull from the very bottom of her soul. She pushed. At 11:58 p.m., on the night of the gala, Sarah Noel Sterling entered the world. Her cry was loud, piercing, and indignant. It was the cry of a fighter. Dr. Evans cleaned the baby off and placed her on Eleanor's chest. She was tiny, barely 5 pounds, with a tuft of dark hair and, inevitably, those piercing blue Sterling eyes. "She's perfect," Elena whispered, tears streaming down her face, washing away the pain of the last month. "Hi, Sarah. I'm your mama." Arthur looked down at the great-granddaughter he never thought he'd see. He reached out a trembling finger, and the baby's tiny hand wrapped around it. "Welcome to the family, Sarah," Arthur choked out. "You will never know cold, you will never know hunger, and you will never, ever know a man like your father." The following morning, 9. Aim. Marcus woke up on the sofa in his office at Thorn Tech. He had walked there from the plaza in the snow, too ashamed to call an Uber, too broke to call a limo. His neck was stiff. His mouth tasted like stale champagne and failure. He sat up, rubbing his eyes, hoping it was all a nightmare. But the red blinking light on his desk phone told him it was real. He pressed the button. "Mr. Thorne," the voice of his corporate attorney, Weinstein, filled the room. "I'm resigning. The SEC just raided the downtown server farm. Apparently, you used the company pension fund to shore up the liquidity for the gala. That's federal fraud, Marcus. I can't represent you." Marcus dropped the phone. The pension fund. He had borrowed from it, intending to pay it back after the IPO. How did they know? The door to his office burst open. It wasn't the police, it was worse. 3 men in dark grey suits walked in. They carried briefcases stamped with the logo of Nemesis Trust. "Marcus Thorne," the lead man said. "I am head of counsel for Arthur Sterling. We are here to execute the foreclosure on the Obsidian Tower." "You can't do that." Marcus stood up, swaying. "I have 30 days to cure the default." "Actually," the lawyer smiled, a shark-like baring of teeth. "Review your contract. Subsection 4, paragraph B. The morality clause combined with the insolvency trigger allows for immediate seizure of assets if the debtor is under criminal investigation. The SEC announcement 10 minutes ago triggered it." The lawyer placed a document on the desk. "This building belongs to Mr. Sterling now. You are trespassing. Security will escort you out. You have 5 minutes to collect personal effects. No electronics, no files." "My house," Marcus whispered. "My penthouse." "Included in the asset seizure," the lawyer said. "Your car has already been towed. Your personal accounts have been frozen by the DOJ." Marcus looked around the office. The glass walls, the Eames chair, the award for Innovator of the Year on the shelf. It was all smoke. "Where am I supposed to go?" Marcus asked, his voice cracking. "I have nothing." The lawyer paused at the door. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled piece of paper. "Mr. Sterling wanted you to have this." He placed it on the desk. Marcus picked it up. It was a flyer for a homeless shelter in the Bronx. Written on the back, in elegant, fountain pen script, were the words, "Glass breaks very easily." 2 security guards, men Marcus had hired, men he had underpaid, walked in. "Let's go, boss," one of them smirked. "Don't make a scene." Marcus Thorne walked out of his tower with a cardboard box containing a stapler, a photo of himself, and a stress ball. As he stepped onto the sidewalk, the paparazzi were waiting. They didn't shout questions, they just laughed. 1 year later, New York City was once again dressed in its holiday best. The Rockefeller tree was lit, the skaters were circling the rink, and the air smelled of roasted chestnuts. But nowhere was the spirit of Christmas more alive than at the Sterling Foundation's annual winter ball. Held at the newly renovated Sterling Hall, formerly the Obsidian Tower, the event was the hottest ticket in the world. But it wasn't for profit. Every dollar raised was going to support single mothers and orphanages across the tri-state area. Elena Sterling stood on the balcony overlooking the ballroom. She looked breathtaking. She wore a gown of emerald green silk, and her face was radiant. She wasn't just beautiful, she was formidable. In the last year, she had taken a seat on the board of Sterling Industries. She had launched a new line of affordable, sustainable housing. She was no longer the girl who needed saving. She was the savior. "Mama!" A giggle interrupted her thoughts. Elena turned to see Sarah, now 1 year old, toddling across the floor in a red velvet dress. She was holding onto the finger of a very happy, very tired Arthur Sterling. "She's fast," Arthur laughed, picking the child up. "She has your sprint, Elena. I can barely keep up." "She's perfect," Elena smiled, taking her daughter. Sarah cooed, playing with the sapphire locket around Elena's neck. "Are you ready for the speech?" Arthur asked. "I am," Elena nodded. "But first I want to go downstairs, to the street." "The street?" Arthur raised an eyebrow. "Why?" I have a feeling," Elena said. "I need to close the circle." Arthur studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I'll get our coats." Outside, the snow was falling gently. The entrance to Sterling Hall was bustling with limousines and celebrities. Security was tight. Elena and Arthur walked out, flanked by guards. They didn't go to a limo. They walked to the corner of the block, the same corner where, a year ago, a desperate girl had met a Santa. There was a Salvation Army kettle there. But the person ringing the bell wasn't Arthur. It was a young volunteer, smiling and singing. Elena dropped a $100 bill into the kettle. She looked across the street, toward the service entrance of the building, the place where the trash was taken out, where the catering trucks unloaded. A man was standing there. He was wearing a frantic, oversized catering uniform. He was shivering, smoking a cheap cigarette, trying to warm his hands over a grate vent. His face was gaunt, aged 10 years in one. His hair was thinning, and the arrogance that had once defined his jawline was replaced by a slack, defeated droop. It was Marcus. He was working for the catering company hired for the event. He was scraping plates. Elena watched him. She waited for the anger to rise. She waited for the desire to scream at him, to show him her diamonds, to laugh in his face. But nothing came. There was only a dull, distant pity. He looked so small. Marcus looked up. Through the falling snow and the steam from the vent, he locked eyes with her. He froze. The cigarette fell from his lips. He saw Elena, glowing, powerful, holding a baby that he knew, deep down, was his. He saw Arthur Sterling standing beside her like a guardian lion. Marcus took a step forward, his mouth opening. "Elena," he whispered. "Elena, please." He looked at the baby. "Is that—" He took another step, desperation clawing at his throat. He wanted to apologize. He wanted to beg. He wanted to claim that he had changed, even though he hadn't. He just wanted out of the cold. But before he could cross the street, a massive figure stepped in his path. It was Joe, the head of security, whom Marcus had forced to kick Elena out a year ago. Joe was now the personal bodyguard for Elena and Sarah. Joe didn't say a word. He just crossed his arms and stared at Marcus. The look said everything. "You are not welcome in this world anymore." Marcus stopped. He looked at Elena one last time. He saw no hate in her eyes. He saw something worse. He saw indifference. She had forgotten him. He was a bad memory, a ghost of a Christmas past. Elena turned to Arthur. "Let's go inside, grandfather. It's getting cold." "Yes, my dear," Arthur said. As they turned away, Arthur stopped. He looked back at Marcus, shivering in the slush. Arthur reached into his pocket. He didn't pull out a check. He didn't pull out a job offer. He pulled out a single, shiny gold coin. It was a chocolate coin, wrapped in gold foil, the kind they gave to children. Arthur tossed it across the street. It landed at Marcus's feet with a dull clink. "Merry Christmas, Marcus," Arthur called out. Elena and Arthur walked back into the warmth of the light and the music. The heavy doors closed behind them, sealing out the cold. Marcus stood alone in the snow. He bent down and picked up the chocolate coin. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely unwrap it. He took a bite. It was sweet, but in his mouth it tasted like ash. He looked up at the skyscraper he used to own, the family he used to have, and the life he had thrown away for an image. The wind picked up, blowing the flyer for the homeless shelter out of his back pocket and down the wet, grey street. Marcus turned his collar up, picked up a bag of trash, and disappeared into the alleyway. And that, my friends, is the ultimate karma. Marcus Thorne wanted a perfect image, so he threw away his pregnant wife. In the end, he got exactly the image he deserved, watching from the alleyway while the family he abandoned ruled the world. He traded a diamond for a stone, and now he has to carry that weight forever. If this story gave you chills, if you loved seeing Arthur Sterling protect his daughter, smash that like button. Let's get this to 10,000 likes. And tell me in the comments, do you think Marcus deserved forgiveness, or did he get off too easy? I read every comment. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a story. Merry Christmas, and remember, be careful who you mistreat, because you never know who is watching.